morning. Good Chodesh. We're continuing this morning with Maseches Shekalim. We're in Perek Zayin, Perek Zayin Mishnah Aleph, which is on page 51 of your Maseches Shekalim. We'll then learn some Das Tivunos today, and tomorrow we'll begin the official new schedule, which you should be receiving later today. So again, we're in Maseches Shekalim, Perek Zayin, Mishnah Aleph, page 51. Now, many of the Mishnayos that are coming up are not specifically related to the collection of the Maseches HaShekel, or how the Maseches HaShekel was dispersed, or what the Maseches HaShekel was used for. These are subjects that we covered earlier in the Masechta. But because of the first halacha that will be discussed in today's Mishnah, several other halachas are discussed, and these are very complex halachas. They deal with the concepts of rov, karo. These are concepts that are usually more attributable to Masechtos like chulin and ksubas. But we're going to get just a very superficial understanding of concepts of what do you do when you don't know exactly the situation of a particular object. Is it hektish? Is it not hektish? Is it ma'aser sheni? Is it not ma'aser sheni? And that's going to be the subject of many Mishnayos now. The reason that it comes up is because of this first halacha in Mishnah Zayin. We learned in Perek Vav, the last Mishnah, Perek Vav Mishnah Hey, we learned, it's on page 48 in your Maseches Shekalim, Shlosha Asa Shofaros Hayu Bamikdash. There were 13 shofaros. For us, a shofar is not the Rosh Hashanah shofar. The shofar is a pushka, collection boxes. There were 13 shofaros in the Beis HaMikdash, and money was put into these shofaros for different purposes. We learned the purpose of each of the 13 shofaros when we learned those Mishnayos. So now, sometimes you'll have a situation where in the Azorah, where these 13 boxes are, you'll find some money on the floor, and you don't know which box that money came from. Those are the examples we're going to have now in the Mishnah. The most prominent example that fits into this Masechta of Shekalim is Moi Shenimtzu Ben Shekalim Linadav. You find in your Mishnayos on page 52 and 53, there are all kinds of pictures of boxes, and it looks like these are very complicated Mishnayos. As you'll see, they're not complicated on the superficial level we're going to learn them. The underlying rules, Roiv and Karo, are extremely complex. But for us, we're going to learn these Mishnayos just on a basic level. So you're in the Azorah, and there's money that's laying on the floor between the Shekalim and the Nedava. There are 7 shofar, 7 pushkis that are designated for specific items. For example, a person designated money while he was at home. He is required to bring a korban chatos for whatever reason, and he designates 100 shekel. This 100 shekel, I'm going to buy a korban chatos. He goes to Shekalim, he buys the animal. The animal turned out to be 90 shekel. The 10 shekel went into a pushka, a shofar called moser chatos, the leftover money from a chatos. And then there were pushkis where people put in money for the Maseches HaShekel. They would walk into the Beis HaMikdash, had Maseches HaShekel, they can put it directly into Maseches HaShekel pushka. So money is found between a pushka that is Maseches HaShekel and a pushka that says on it Nedava. We said that there are 7 specific pushkis, and then there are 6 pushkis that are for Nedava. We went through all the Nedava pushkis and all the other 7 pushkis. So there are 7 specific pushkis and 6 that deal with Nedava, 13 together. At any rate, money is found between the pushkas. One of the pushkas is Matzis HaShekel, and one of the other pushkas is for Nadava. Now, what happens with the money that's in the Nadava pushkas? That money was used for Kayetz HaMizbeach. We learned about this earlier. The Beis HaMikdash, if it wasn't a busy day and the public offerings were done on a day like today, there's the regular Korban Tamid, there's the Korban Musaf of Rosh Chodesh, and then people can bring their private korbanos, an Ola, Shlomim, Achatas, or Asham. If it's not a busy day, and there are not the korbanos being brought in the Beis HaMikdash, so there were animals that were bought with this Kaitz HaMizbeach money. There was money bought with this Nadava money, animals, and these animals would be used for a korban Ola, to keep the Mizbeach busy and to keep the Beis HaMikdash busy, to have a covered, it was a covered for the Beis HaMikdash, that it's things happening there. There's Avodas Hashem happening there. So you find some money, it's between the pushka for Matzis HaShekel and between the pushka for Nadava. Now let's think about this for a moment. The money that's in the pushka for Matzis HaShekel would have been used for a whole set of items. The korban Ola that's brought in the morning and the afternoon daily is bought with that money. The korban Musaf for today, for example, Rosh Chodesh, is bought with that money. But what does the korban Musaf include? Korban Musaf also has a korban Chatas in it. Today, in the Beis HaMikdash, they would have brought the korban Tamid Shel Shachar, which we learned about in Maseches Tamid, and then they would have brought the korban Musaf, the additional korbanos that are brought for Rosh Chodesh, and amongst the special korbanos for Rosh Chodesh, there's a goat for Chatas. That goat for Chatas is eaten, the meat is eaten by the Kohanim of today's Beis Av. We learned about the Beis Av. So the pushka that has Matzis HaShekel money in it will pay for a korban Ola, which is completely consumed on the Mizbeach for Hashem, except for the hide that goes to Kohanim, but no part of an Ola is eaten. In a Matzis HaShekel pushka, there's also going to be money that will be used to buy a korban Chatas, a public offering of a Chatas, and that will be eaten by Kohanim. Some Matzis HaShekel money is going to be used to sustain the city of Yerushalayim. It could be the walls of Yerushalayim. We learned about the bridges that were built earlier in the Masechta. But the pushka of Matzis HaShekel money is going to be used for multiple things: Ola, Chatas, maintenance of the city of Yerushalayim in certain aspects. Whereas the pushka that has Nadava, that pushka, the money in that pushka is going to be used for one reason: to buy animals when the Beis HaMikdash is not busy, and all of those animals that will be brought will be Ola. So now if we think about two pushkas, which pushka, quote unquote, would you consider more holy? The Matzis HaShekel pushka or the Nadava pushka? Well, the Matzis HaShekel pushka has money in it. Some of it's going to be used for an Ola, totally consumed for Hashem. Some of it's going to have Chatas money, that will be some part of the animal will be eaten by Kohanim. And some of the money will be used for other things. Whereas the Nadava pushka is only going to be used to buy korban Ola for Kaitz HaMizbeach. So when you look at it just in the abstract, the money in the Nadava pushka is quote unquote holier than the money in the Shekalim Matzis HaShekel pushka, because the Matzis HaShekel pushka has money that will be used for things other than Ola, and the pushka Nadava will only be used to buy korban Ola that's completely consumed for Hashem. Now with that, let's read the Mishnah. Moishe nimtzu ben Shekalim Nadava. Money that's found between the pushka of Matzis HaShekel and the pushka of Nadava. Korov lashkolim. If the money is closer, geographically closer, you measure it, and the money is closer to the Shekalim pushka, Yiplu lashkolim. You put it back into the shekel pushka. La nedova, if the money is closer to the nedova pushka, yiplu la nedova. Put it in the nedova pushka. We learn this out. There's a din called karov. When certain objects, we don't know what this object is, there's a rule called karov. The closest, the object, whatever it's closer to, we will give it that din. So if the money is closer to this machzis hashekel, it becomes machzis hashekel. If it's closer to nedava, it'll be a nedava. Where do we learn out the rule karov from? We learn it out from the parsha of Egla Arufa. At the end of Parsha Shoftim, there's a parsha of Lo Aleinu, a dead body was found between two cities, and we don't know who the murderer is. We don't know which city the murderer came from. So the Beis Din measures the two cities, measures the distance between the dead body and the two cities, and the city that's closer to the dead body has to pay for and bring an egla arufa, and the whole process of egla arufa. From there, Chachamim learned out the rule of karov. If the dead body is closer to one city, that's the city that has to bring an egla arufa. So that's where we learn the rule karov. When we don't know something about an object, we have the right to say it came from the place that measures closer to it. So if we don't know where the money on the floor of the Azorah came from, and it's between the two pushkis, machzis hashekel and nedava, closer to machzis hashekel, it's machzis hashekel, closer to nedava, it's nedava. But what happens, mechza lemechza? What happens if it's smack in the middle? We measure it, and it's just smack in the middle. It's between nedava and between machzis hashekel. What do we do with the money? Well, we know now what to do with the money. Yiplu la nedava. Put it in the nedava pushka. Why? Because the nedava pushka is now going to be a chumrah. The nedava pushka is quote unquote holier than the machzis hashekel pushka. Again, machzis hashekel pushka, money in that pushka is going to go to buy an ola. Again, the machzis hashekel pushka is for public expenses. The public tamid, the public korban chatas and rosh chodesh and yantif. So that pushka has ola, chatas, all kinds of things in it that we learned early in the Masechta. Nedava can only be used to purchase money for a korban ola. Therefore, between the two pushkas, which would be the chumrah, the stricter rule would be to put it in a nedava where only an ola can be bought. Okay, so those are the three rules. The money is closer to nedava. The money is closer to machzis hashekel. The money is right in between. It goes to nedava because nedava becomes a chumrah. It's a stringent rule because from nedava you can only buy an ola. And now there's going to be a whole set of halachas that follow this pattern. Bein eitzim lulavona. There were two pushkis that we learned of the 13 pushkis. One where a person wanted to donate money so the Beis Hamikdash can buy wood to put on the mizbeach for the ma'aracha that we learned about in Masechta Tamid. The logs that were put on the ma'aracha gedola, ma'aracha shel ketoris, and ma'aracha of eish tadir, eish tam. A person wants to donate to the wood. He puts money in the pushka that's called eitzim. There was another pushka called lavona, where you donate money into the pushka, and with that money they bought lavona, a certain type of incense, and this incense was put on a korban mincha. Flower offerings had lavona put on it. Same rule. You don't know, you find this money on the floor between these two pushkas, what do you do with the money? Same rule. If the money's closer to the eitzim pushka, put it into the eitzim pushka. La lavona, it's closer to the lavona pushka. Yiplu la lavona, put it into lavona. Mechza la mechza, it's smack in between. Yiplu la lavona, put it into lavona. Same rule, it's a chumrah. If you look at the two pushkis, what is eitzim and what is lavona? Eitzim are wood that's put on the mizbeach. in order to be able to burn karbonis on the Mizbeach. Whereas Levona is on the Mincha, and it is an offering. So while the Eitzim help us bring an offering, the Levona is actually an offering with the flour offering. So between the two, what's more chamor? The wood that helps us bring a carbon, or an actual carbon, the actual Levona that's burnt on the Mizbeach. Obviously, the Levona, therefore, if it's between the two pushkas, we don't know where the money came from, it goes into Levona. Next case. Bein Akinin Lagos Le'ola. There were two pushkas in the Beis Hamikdash. One said on it Kinin, older pigeons, and one said Goes Le'ola, the younger pigeons that were used for an Ola. This was a machlokes we learned before Rosh Hashanah about how the pushkas of the Kinim and the Goes Le'ola worked. For us, we're going to learn it simply now. You have the pushka of Kenan, the pushka of Kenan, and the pushka of Goes Le'ola. So now we don't know where the money came from. And the rule is again simple. Korov lakinim, yiplu lakinim. If it's closer to the Kenan, then you put it in the Kenim, the older pigeon. In other words, people brought money, put it into the pushka, and with that money, older pigeons were brought either as a nadava or because a person was required to bring a pigeon. This is how we learn this Mishnah right now. Lagos le'ola, yip lagos le'ola. If it's closer to the for the pushka of the young pigeon offerings, then you put it into the goes le'ola. Mechza lemechza, yiplu lagos le'ola. If it's right in between, it'll go into the pushka goes le'ola. Why? Same reasoning. Into the pushka of Kenan, some of that money is going to be used to buy an Ola pigeon, and some of that money is going to be used to buy a Chatas pigeon. Whereas the pushka of goes Ola, that money only goes for an Ola. So we have the same thing as we had earlier in the Mishnah. One pushka has money that's going to be used only for Ola, which means it's only for Hashem, goes Ola. And one is going to have a pushka for Kenan, in which they are going to buy Ola and Chatas, which means Chatas, some of the pigeon meat will be eaten by Kohanim. So now you have these two different pushkas. One, again, will be considered, quote unquote, more holier than the other. Okay, so it's the same rule. The Kenan is going to have Chatas and Ola in it, whereas the Gozli Olos only have Olos. Next rule. Bein Chulin l'Maisa Sheni. This is not in the Beis Hamikdash. This is in your home. You have a pushka in your house where you put your money, your private money, Chulin. And you have a pushka in your house that's Maisa Sheni money. Well, how do you get Maisa Sheni money? You're supposed to bring the first fruits to Yerushalayim and eat them in Yerushalayim. Baruch Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives Klal Yisrael a tremendous amount of produce. They cannot carry all that produce to Yerushalayim. They can't carry all the Maisa Sheni. Obviously, they don't take their whole produce. They take Maisa from their produce. But Baruch Hashem, they had such a wonderful year. They have so many olives and so much grapes and so much pomegranates, etc. It's just too much to schlep to Yerushalayim. So the Rebbeinu Shalom tells us in the Torah, you can be podeh the Maisa Sheni. You can take the kedusha off the fruit and put it on money, and now you can eat the fruit at home, and the money has to be taken to Yerushalayim, and Yerushalayim, you buy animals, bring a korban shlomim, You can buy other fruits and fruits, and you can eat it in Yerushalayim. So it's easier to carry the money than the fruits. So a person has two pushkas in his house. One pushka is for chulin, and one pushka he's been depositing Ma'aser Sheni, and he finds coins in his house between the two pushkas. So Karav l'chulin yiplu l'chulin. If the money is closer to the chulin pushka, it is chulin, it's your private money. L'Ma'aser Sheni, if the money is closer to the Ma'aser Sheni pushka, yiplu Ma'aser Sheni, it's Ma'aser Sheni money. Mechza l'mechza, what happens if the money is right between your pushka of Ma'aser Sheni and your pushka of private money? Yiplu Ma'aser Sheni becomes Ma'aser Sheni money. That's a simple one. Between the two, what's the chumrah? You don't know what this money is. It's right in between the two pushkas. Is it my private money or is it my Ma'aser Sheni money? Obviously, Ma'aser Sheni is going to win because that's the chumrah. Zeh haklal. Now the Mishnah says, this is the rule. After we see all these general cases, the Mishnah says, after we see all these specific cases, the Mishnah says a general rule, Zeh haklal, holchen acha hakorov lohaka. If an item is closer to something, you follow whatever is closer, even if it's a kula. So if there's money between your Ma'aser Sheni pushka and your private money pushka, and the money is a little closer to your private money, you keep it as your private money, even though that's a kula. The rule of Karov says that it is even lakula. Mechza lemechza. But if it's between the two and you can't figure out which one it's closer to, it's smack in the middle, lahachmir. And the rule is you always go l'chumra. Okay, that's a fairly simple Mishnah. Different cases, you always go karov when you don't know which pushka the money came from. If you can't use karov because the money is right between the two pushkas, then you go l'chumra. And l'chumra could mean, for example, if one pushka you can use for ola and chatas, and one pushka you can only use for ola. Ola is a bigger chumrah because that means that all the money is going to go for korban ola, which is completely for Hashem, whereas the other pushka will have chatas in it, and that will be consumed by a kohen. So if it's karov, you can use karov even lakula. If it's smack in the middle, then you use the rule of l'chumrah. Mishnah Beis. We're going to read the Mishnah. This again is a Mishnah that, because we just had this Mishnah about money in between different things, what do you do? So the Tana continues with this idea, of Yehuda Nasi continues with this idea of money found in different places, even though this is not necessarily, it's not related to Machzis HaShekel. Mois shenimtzu lefnei socharei behema la'olam ma'isa. We're talking about the city of Yerushalayim now. And the person finds money in front of in the marketplace. He finds money in front of the stall or the kiosk where a person sells animals. When a person is selling animals in Yerushalayim, usually he's selling them for karbanos. People need karbanos, they come to Yerushalayim. So you find money, and the money is in front of the area where there's a person who sells animals, seicharei behema. And you find this money anytime during the year. It could be during Chol HaMoed, it can be before Yontif, it could be after Yontif, it could be in Cheshvan where there's no Yontif, it could be any time of the year. If you find, they're going to be different cases, so you have to keep track of the cases. Money in front of an animal seller in Yerushalayim, no matter what time of the year you find the money there, la'olam ma'aser. The rule is you consider it meiser money, and you treat it as meiser money. Why? Because when people came to Yerushalayim the whole year, many people, obviously there was an Aliyah L'Regel, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, And when people were Ola Regel, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, they also, because they already had to come to Yerushalayim for Yontif and bring their Yontif Karbonis, Olas Re'iyah, they already brought with them their Meiser Sheni money to accomplish both Aliyah L'Regel and the Karbonis for Yontif, and to bring their Meiser Sheni money to Yerushalayim and buy animals for Korban Shlomim in Yerushalayim. This way, they would not have to travel to Yerushalayim for a separate Meiser Sheni. Remember, we've gone through this cheshbon. Person had to be Ola Regel for Pesach. So if he was in a distant part of Eretz Yisrael, all the way up north, and we know this from different halachas about how long it took to travel, but if they were up north, it could take 15 days till they got to Yerushalayim. So you have a Yid who lives up north. He has to come to Yerushalayim for Pesach. Pesach is the 15th day of Nisan. So he's going to leave, give or take a day or two, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and he's going to travel to Yerushalayim. So that is now 15 days of his time to get to Yerushalayim. He then spends 7 days in Yerushalayim for Pesach. Now he packs up, and he's going to spend 15 days going back home. That's a total now of 37 days. He's either been traveling or in Yerushalayim. He gets back home, and it's Iyar. And then he has to, 15 days before Shavuos in Sivan, pack up and go back to Yerushalayim, another 15-day trip. He's going to spend 1 day in Yerushalayim for Shavuos, or perhaps 2 or 3, depending, or could be even a full 7, depending upon when he was able to get into the Azorah to bring his Karbonis. And then he spent 15 days going home. And now he had basically a nice summer. And then sometime in Tishrei, he would have to start the trek back to Yerushalayim, 15 days, to be there for 7-day Sukkot. And then after Sukkot, Shmini Atzeres, he would start the trek 15 days back home, v'chulu, v'chulu. So we end up with a situation where people are spending a good portion, they're spending 3 times, if just traveling 3 times a year, 15 days going, 15 days coming, 15 days going, 15 days coming, 15 days going, 15 days coming for 3 regalim. So you have there 90 days or 3 months where you're on the road going back and forth to Yerushalayim, besides the amount of time you spent in Yerushalayim. So people, when they had to be Ola Regel, they did whatever else they needed to do in the Beis HaMikdash when they were Ola Regel. A person had to bring a korban chatas or a korban asham or whatever korban, they would try to fit it in for during an aliyah l'regel. So you have a person who you have now money in front of an animal dealer in Yerushalayim. It doesn't make a difference what time of the year it is. The money you find in that area is presumed to be Meiser Sheni money, because people are, during the regalim, people are bringing their Meiser Sheni money, plus they have to bring all the Yontif money. There's only so much you can eat during a Yontif with your family. So what would happen was, when the Yontif was over, people who had to go back home would take their leftover Meiser Sheni money that they didn't have a chance to spend in Yerushalayim, and they would leave that money with friends or relatives and tell them, this is Meiser Sheni money. Go during the year and buy yourself animals for a shlomim, buy yourself other types of food that can be used for Meiser Sheni, and a lot of money would be left in Yerushalayim that's Meiser Sheni money that was used the whole year, because this money was left there during the regalim. Therefore, the Mishnah says, because during the year, most money that's in front of an animal dealer will turn out to be Meiser Sheni money, because what we're looking here is now at 2 factors. Where did you find it? In front of an animal seller. And the fact is that the whole year, there's such a tremendous amount of Meiser Sheni money that's being spent in Yerushalayim, specifically in the area of animal sellers, that we assume that if you find money on the floor in front of an animal dealer, an animal seller, you need to treat it as if it's Meiser Sheni and use the money for my Kedushas Meiser Sheni. Rule 1. Bahar Habayis. We're moving further, and you're now on the Har Habayis. You've gone from Yerushalayim onto the Har Habayis. Money you find on the Har Habayis, they are considered chulin. You can keep it as your private money, even on the regal, even on, if you find the money before Yontif, after Yontif, you find the money Chol Hamoed, if you find it on Har Habayis, it is chulin. Why? Because on Har Habayis, we're also going to go according to Rov Shana. Most of the year, what kind of money will you find on the Har Habayis? We're not talking out in front of animal dealers. What is the money that will be most of the year on the Har Habayis? People will bring money, and most of their private money, they enter the Har Habayis with their private wallets, their private money. They already bought the animals in Yerushalayim at the market, and they bring the animals to the Beis Hamikdash. The money to spend to buy animals was done in Yerushalayim. On the Har Habayis, people had wallets, to the extent you're allowed to have a wallet, the type of wallet. They had their private money. But given that the money that's found on the Har Habayis, based upon the whole year, we assume that the money is chulin. Somebody dropped his private money, and therefore you can keep it and assume, and thereby assume that it was someone's private money. That's rule number 2. So in Yerushalayim, in front of a meats, and in Yerushalayim, in front of an animal dealer, anytime during the year, that money is presumed to be Meiser Sheni, and you have to use it for Meiser Sheni purposes. If you find the money on the Har Habayis anytime during the year, including during Chol Hamoed, it's your money, it's chulin. Now we're going back to Yerushalayim. But Yerushalayim, what happens if you find the money in Yerushalayim, but not in front of an animal dealer? Case number 1 is in Yerushalayim, in front of an animal dealer. No matter what time of year, you assume it's Meiser Sheni money. On the Har Habayis, no matter what time of year, it's private money. We're going not in front of an animal seller, in front of, just find money in the street in Yerushalayim. B'shas haregel, if it's the time of Yontif, see money on the floor, Chol Hamoed, and you pick it up, Meiser. The assumption is it's Meiser money because during a Yontif, Chol Hamoed, it was Aliyah L'Regel time, the whole city is packed with Jewish people who have Meiser Sheni money, and they're looking to buy animals, they're looking to buy food. So if it's in Yerushalayim and is not even in front of an animal seller, it still has the rule of Meiser Sheni. And the rest of the year in Yerushalayim, but not in front of an animal dealer, chulin, then you can keep the money. We'll talk about this halach in a moment. First, let's summarize. You find money in front of an animal dealer in Yerushalayim, doesn't make it. So 2 factors: Yerushalayim and money and an animal dealer. No matter when you find the money, it's Meiser Sheni money, and you must use it as if it's and you must use it for Meiser Sheni purposes. You go to the Har Habayis, you find money, it doesn't make a difference when you find the money there. It's your money, it's chulin. In Yerushalayim, but not in front of an animal dealer. Now we go to, it depends on the time. If it's Yontif time, you assume it's Meiser Sheni money because the city is full with people that have brought Meiser Sheni money. If it's the rest of the year and in Yerushalayim and not in front of an animal dealer, then the money is yours, it's chulin. So we have case number one, money that's found in front of an animal dealer in Yerushalayim, Ma'aser Sheni. Money that's found any time of the year on the Har HaBayis, chulin. Number three, money that's found in Yerushalayim, not in front of an animal dealer. During Yontif, Ma'aser Sheni. Money that's found in Yerushalayim, not during Yontif, and it's not in front of an animal dealer, it's chulin. Those are the four rules. If you look in your Mishnayos, they give you a picture on page 55 of someone sweeping a street. Picture number 70 on page 55. Underneath that picture, it says, Shuke Shvake Yerushalayim Asuyim Leskave B'chol Yom. The streets of Jerusalem were swept every single day because it is Yerushalayim, and for the cover of Yerushalayim, they kept the streets clean. Halavai people had that cover today, and they didn't drop the seeds that they eat, the shells on the floor, and halavai that they understood not to drop their potato chip bags on the floor. Yerushalayim was swept every day to keep the streets clean. The reason why they have this picture is based on a Gemara. The Gemara explains the differences between the Har HaBayis and Yerushalayim. The Har HaBayis, we say no matter when you find the money there, it's chulin. Yontif, not Yontif, it's always going to be chulin. Because on the Har HaBayis, there was no money, there was no animal dealers there. And even during a Yontif time, you can assume that it's chulin, because on the Har HaBayis, what are we going to look at the Har HaBayis? We're going to say what goes on the Har HaBayis the whole year, not a specific Yontif. Har HaBayis is the whole year. Har HaBayis doesn't have animal dealers on it. So we're going to be looking at the Har HaBayis and saying, what kind of money is on the Har HaBayis the whole year? The Har HaBayis the whole year, people bring, millions of people come to the Har HaBayis during the year with private money. So we're going to assume it's private money, although it's possible somebody had Ma'aser Sheni money in his pocket, came to the Har HaBayis, and it fell out of his pocket. But given the fact that there are millions of people that come to the Har HaBayis, the money we assume is private money. And we don't distinguish between Yontif or the rest of the year. When we come to Yerushalayim, and it's not in front of a money dealer, an animal dealer, so these are sort of analogous cases. If we leave out the first case in the Mishnah, the first case in the Mishnah is money in Yerushalayim in front of an animal dealer. We're done with the animal dealer. We then went to the case of Har HaBayis, no animal dealer. We then went to Yerushalayim, no animal dealer, but the rules were different. Har HaBayis, money belongs to you. Yerushalayim, it depends if it's Yontif, it's Ma'aser Sheni, and the rest of the year it's chulin. The reason for that is the rest of the year we consider it chulin because the streets of Yerushalayim are swept every single day. And because they're swept every single day, there is no, so to speak, rove. Yerushalayim during Yontif, there are millions of people there who have brought Ma'aser Sheni money. You can assume the money on the floor is Ma'aser Sheni money. Because what are we looking at? We're looking at millions of people on the first day Chol HaMoed Sukkos, or millions of people on the second day Chol HaMoed Pesach. These millions of people are carrying Ma'aser Sheni money to a great extent. Therefore, we assume it's Ma'aser Sheni money. But if it's Yerushalayim, not in front of animal dealers, then what are we talking about? We're talking about people are in the city of Yerushalayim. We cannot look at the bigger picture of all the people for a whole year because there's no all the people for a whole year. The idea of let's look at the whole year is not relevant because the street is being swept up every day. So being that the street is being swept up every day in Yerushalayim, the money that was there yesterday is not there today. The money that's there today, that's on the street, won't be there tomorrow. The sweepers are going to find the money. So the idea that we can go according to the rove, we can follow the majority, let's look at the whole year together, is irrelevant in Yerushalayim when it's not Yontif. Because when it's not Yontif, the money, whatever it is, has been swept up yesterday, be swept up today, so you can't look at all the money. What would all the money, if I look at all 365 days of the year, what would be the rove of this money? That's not how it can work in Yerushalayim. Every day is a separate day in and of itself because the streets get swept every day. As a result, we look only at that day. And if we look at only that day, on Yontif, we assume that it's Maaseh Sheni money because we're looking at that day, Maaseh Sheni money. There are millions of people there with Maaseh Sheni money, and the money that's on the floor in the street of Yerushalayim, not in front of an animal dealer, is going to be Maaseh Sheni money. But if it's during the rest of the year, when there's not this exorbitant amount of Maaseh Sheni money, if someone dropped Maaseh Sheni money, it got swept up yesterday. If Maaseh Sheni money was dropped today, it got swept up today. Therefore, I can't look at the bigger picture. I need to look at each day itself. And each day in itself, I can say that the money is not Maaseh Sheni money because it's not during the Yontif season. So that's where this sweeping picture comes in, that Shukei Yerushalayim are meskabdim b'chol yom. The marketplaces, the streets of Yerushalayim are swept up every single day. The Har HaBayis was not swept every day. It didn't need to be swept every day. And therefore, on the Har HaBayis, we look at the bigger picture. What are we looking at the Har HaBayis? There are no animal dealers there. And what are we looking at the Har HaBayis? We're looking at the whole picture. What goes on here for 365 days? It goes on here for 365 days. I'm allowed to say that the vast majority of the money is chulin money. I can't do that outside the Har HaBayis because it is swept every day, and therefore each day is looked at by itself. Why is the Har HaBayis not swept every day? So the Mefarshim give two reasons. First of all, it didn't need to be swept every day because the Har HaBayis was the Har HaBayis. We learned about it. It was a mountain, and it kept on getting higher and higher. Because it kept getting higher and higher, and it was on a higher level than the city of Yerushalayim, the winds blew and spread out any dust that was on the Har HaBayis, and therefore they didn't have to sweep up the Har HaBayis every day. The other rule is that people, when they come into the Har HaBayis, you had to be careful. First of all, you can't wear your shoes on the Har HaBayis. You can't wear sandals on the Har HaBayis. And then you would have to clean off the bottom of your feet before you enter the Har HaBayis. You are not allowed to enter the Har HaBayis with avak, with dirt or dust on your feet. So therefore, people are very careful, obviously, on the Har HaBayis, what they did, how they walked. So therefore, the Har HaBayis did not need sweeping every day. Your streets of Yerushalayim needed sweeping every day. As a result, again, I can't say what goes on in the streets of Yerushalayim during the majority of 365 days. That's an irrelevant question because every day is a separate day in Yerushalayim because the streets got cleaned up. So what happened yesterday is not relevant to what falls down today. And what falls down today is not relevant to what falls down tomorrow. So therefore, I need a microscope. I need to look at each day separately. So if I look at each day separately in Yerushalayim, if it's Yontif time, it's Ma'aser Sheni money because of the millions of Jews that are there with Ma'aser Sheni money. And if it's not Yontif time, then I can assume that it's money that fell out of someone's pocket. It's private money, and I can use it for private money. On the Harabayas, where there's no sweeping every day, I'm looking at a bigger picture, and I'm looking at what kind of money can it be on the Harabayas that fell during this 365-day period. And for that, I'm permitted to say the majority of the money would have been chulin. So those are the first two Mishnayos in Perek Zayin, and Blineda will continue tomorrow or Tuesday, depending upon the schedule that's being worked out. We're going to continue with Mishnah Gimel, which again is the same kind of subject matter. If you find something in a place and you're not sure what it is, we're getting now closer to Karbanos. If you find pieces of meat in the Azorah, and you don't know, is it a carbon chatas, is it a carbon ola, what carbon is it? If it's a carbon ola, I have to burn it on Mizbeach. If it's a carbon chatas, a kohen can eat it. What do I do with pieces of meat that are found on the floor in the Azorah? So those are the next halachas we will take care of. Take a look at.